In an unforgiving world, we are rarely given second chances. So then, what would you do if faced with an impossible choice? What would you do if your hands were tied by those you love? Would you ask for forgiveness and sprout your wings to be free, knowing your departure would surely mean their demise? Or would you solemnly commit to fulfill your life's purpose, forever chained to the ground? We meet in a time where magic still rules the land, and where there are plentiful places yet to be discovered. Here, amongst the thorns, like a rose budding through the ice in spring, a love story is born. Welcome to the kingdom of Azure. Azure is situated on the western coast of the continent of Varia. This oceanside kingdom is nestled amongst the gray stones and evergreen forests. The land is a perfect blend of green and blue. These mystic lands are home to creatures of fable and is the cradle of warriors of legend. They say that the gods' very descendants still rule these lands. The clans that have called this place home far before time hold the key to these secrets, and only they would be able to say for sure. In order to understand the kingdom and how it came to be, one must first understand who and what these clans are. The land of Azure's true strength is made up of 3 clans: the Corvus, the Ensis, and the Narrow. The Corvus clan worship their goddess Dea Cor, the goddess of healing. The Ensis clan worships the goddess Dea Es, the goddess of battle. And the Narrow clan worship the son of Dea Es and Dea Cor. His name is Narrow. These 3 powerful clans rule the land in unity and harmony. Both the Ensis and Corvus existed far before the Narrow. Legend says that one day, the first of the Narrow arrived onto the shores, and the leader of the Corvus fell in love with one of the women that came from the waters. Though the first Narrow did not stay long and needed to return from whence they came. The leader of the Corvus did not want this to be, and so he pleaded to his goddess to allow them the ability to stay on land and not to be forced to leave. The goddess, hearing his plea, agreed on one condition. The Corvus would be held responsible for the well-being of the Narrow people. As long as one child of the Narrow was on land, the Corvus would be bound by a threat of death to protect them. The Corvus leader agreed, not thinking of what was to come of this pact. And so the Narrow people established a Dian on land and grew in number. The Ensis clan, having been long friends and holding many familial ties with the Corvus, vowed to protect them and whatever they decided to do. But as time came to pass, other men discovered these lands and established their homes alongside the clans and their people. Mankind was pushing their way closer to these clans' ancestral homes. This grew tension between them, and war was on the horizon. The Corvus was preparing for war, and the Ensis promised to back them. The Narrow people, seeing the bloodshed that was to come, offered a gift of peace as a last resort to not see all the destruction and loss. The Narrow offered a marriage proposal between them and mankind. The Corvus protested, but the Narrow, knowing how much suffering would come of this, held fast to their proposal. The Corvus reluctantly agreed, and the Ensis followed suit. And so, a new era dawned on these lands, where mankind and the children of the gods unified. A kingdom was born. Through the alliance of the 3 founding leaders, they declared the first royal lineage. The Azure name was born. The first king was William Narrow, and the first queen was Emera Azure. William of the Ocean and Emera of the Foreign Men united both people. As for the clans, they vowed to serve under the Azure Kingdom as long as there was a Narrow on the throne, promising to protect them till the very end of time. There was a time of peace and discovery in these years. The kingdom grew and expanded its borders. Culture and art was in its infancy, but growing rapidly. They learned of new kingdoms around them and of other clans that also protected them. Towards the end of King William's reign, war was breaking and the other kingdoms were establishing borders, and so there was a time of suffering. As this chapter came to a close, the lands of the continents were divided, and the map's edges were filled in. The kingdom of Azure stood strong thanks to their clans and the protection of their gods. Azure grew into a proud kingdom and a rich nation. King William fulfilled his promise to protect the kingdom till his final breath. The throne was passed to his son, Jove, and his son, Eurus, each one placing the burden of the gods on their shoulders. With each new generation that took the throne, they began to forget where their strength had come from. As time progressed, the clans were seen as glorified sects rather than warriors. The Azure lineage was becoming bold and self-centered, claiming that the gods were no longer necessary. Emboldened by their conquests and achievements, they pushed the clans aside. The clans did not protest, knowing that their vow was to protect the Narrow, not mankind. King Eurus, a third-generation Narrow, was no longer considered of the Narrow. The protection given by the clans only went as far as one generation away from the true lineage of the Narrow, and no more. King Eurus, not understanding this critical detail, married a human woman, Christine. At first, their reign was no different than before. The Narrow people were out of the royal lineage for the first time in 300 years. The clans retrieved their protection from the kingdom quietly, though King Eurus did not care. It was in his 11th year on the throne, when what is now known as the Red Sky Massacre came to pass. The land was plunged into deep darkness, and the sky turned to blood red. An evil broke through the earth's surface and threatened to swallow the continent itself. That fateful day, the rogues attacked. An ancient darkness that was said to have been born with the earth itself launched an attack of such magnitude it would have destroyed all living things on earth. All rushed to fight or hide. At the time, no one knew what these things were, nor what they were looking for. The rogues found the Narrow people's Dians and dove in, readying themselves to destroy and devour everyone. When all was but lost, the clans united once more to protect the Narrow, and by default, the few first-generation Narrows back at the palace. The Narrows sent out their leader alongside the Ensis and the Corvus's strongest warriors, and charged into the bloodbath to take back the land at a terribly high cost. That day, 12 years ago, the powerful Boaz of the Ensis, along with Alma the Valiant, Brodney of the Narrow, and the mighty half of the Corvus, fought back to retrieve the Azure Kingdom from the ash it would have been reduced to. The neighboring kingdoms fought with all of their might. It's said that that day on the shores of Varia, the leaders of the 3 clans called out to the gods, invoking their birthright. A terrible wind picked up, and the sky met the earth. It opened, and all that was seen was a great flash of light, so bright that it left all those who looked directly into it permanently blind. Those who remember that day know of the great sacrifice the clans made to serve the kingdom of Azure. Many lives were lost, and many bodies were never recovered. This changed the way the kingdom was structured. The biggest losses were the 3 leaders of the clans, alongside King Eurus himself and the beloved Princess Juliet. The kingdom of Azure passed the reign on to King Eurus's older half-brother, King Leith. The kingdom of Azure now finds itself under the rule of King Leith. Unlike his younger half-brother, This king is kind and wise. Though older, he maintains a sharp mind. The king brought to his reign his wife, now Queen Therese, and their 6 children, Galeo the eldest, and heir to the throne, Sebastian, his 2nd son, Luna, his firstborn daughter, William, his favorite and 3rd son, and lastly, his twins, Saris and Rose. The land felt a sense of stability with King Leith on the throne that had not been seen in over 50 years. The lineage was secure, and the kingdom's focus was now on rebuilding their kingdoms to its former glory. The 3 clans suffered a great loss in numbers. What was once a prosperous and numerous people were now only composed of the old and the children. In order to survive, they united and rebuilt their Dians, their ancestral homes. Before the massacre, each clan had a Dian that was the size of a small town. These homes, with their strong walls, had spells that protected the clan's members within them. But because most of them left to fight in the war, their numbers were significantly reduced. Today, there are only enough people to fill a few small houses within this once great household. Helios took charge of the Corvus after its leader and his brother Hath died in battle. Though he was left sick and injured, he raised the next generation of warriors to ensure they did not disappear. Though the clans were mostly children and elders, Helios knew that this was the generation of destiny. In the present day, the Corvus is led by Charlotte, Hath's only daughter. The Ensis is led by Rowan, Boaz's son, and the Nero by Mariel, Alma's niece. King Leith reinstated the clan's leadership and respect in the lands, giving them a place in the royal council and forming the Shadow Cloaks, the elite guards of the kingdom and its royals. The Nero clan was given the highest honor, proclaiming them the official royal lineage equal to that of the Azure name. This proclamation gave mankind a new focus, and they too vowed to protect the people of the Nero, for they knew they were in command of the true power. It is at this time where our story unfolds. While the past is what makes up the present, it does not write the future. You may wonder why the clans are so highly praised and coveted. You see, each clan possesses a unique ability. The Corvus are healers through an energy they can summon called Lumen. Through this, they can heal themselves and others by concentrating this force into their palms. The Ensis are strong warriors of fire-wielding knowledge. They fight with flaming swords and are said they cannot burn. Similar to the Corvus's Lumen, they can summon an energy called Fulor. This is a highly coveted trait that many people have tried to steal. And of course, the Nero. They possess an uncanny ability to explore the oceans and its secrets. It's rumored that they can swim long distances without coming up for air, that they have a vast knowledge of the ocean and can even control some water mixtures. But because this clan is not as ancient as the Ensis or the Corvus, it still has many secrets to be revealed. So now that we understand this world a bit more clearly, we can take a closer look at this spring rose that's peeking through the still ice to earth. This land holds a delicate balance between heart and honor that must be protected. On one end, we have duty, loyalty, and sacrifice. On the other, we have selfishness, impatience, and desire. These are the driving forces in this realm. It is a dance both chaotic and beautiful that has gone on for far longer than there has been life. So then our heroes are constantly battling between the two. A determined mind is only as strong as the beating heart that fuels it, a balancing act that many before have failed. So then, dear listener, if you made it this far into wanting to understand this mysterious world, will you see it through? Follow me into this land, and over the mountains, across the seas, and into the heart of it all, where we will both discover what heart and honor truly mean.